Part 6. Aris Imparo and Sor I am done they are from Imparo Rising. As Sor closed her eyes and drifted off to sleep, she found herself trapped in a dream. It was a familiar memory from her past that haunted her every night, the one that plagued her with regret, pain, and sorrow. In her dream, she was once again standing in the mall with her boyfriend Aris Imparo standing beside her. He was holding her close, his arms around her waist and his chin resting on her shoulder as they gazed out over the desolate landscape of walkers and destruction. Sor took a deep breath and leaned into his embrace, reveling in the feeling of safety and comfort that came with being in his arms. Suddenly, the calmness of the dream was shattered by the sound of approaching walkers. Aris quickly grabbed Sor by the waist and lifted her up, as he did before, but this time she didn't resist or argue. He boosted her up onto the rooftop of the mall, an act that had saved her life. But this time, when she turned around to see his face, she saw the walkers flooding into the mall, drawn by the noise he had caused. The walkers came at him from all directions, their hands grasping at him as they tried to pull him down. Sor cried out in horror as she watched him getting devoured by the many undead. Sor woke up, drenched in sweat, her heart pounding so fast it felt like a machine gun. She couldn't shake the memory of what had happened to Aris, the man who had given his life to save hers, and as long as she was still alive, she would honor him for his brave sacrifice. Sor lay there for a moment, breathing deeply, before she got out of bed and headed towards her kitchen. She poured herself a glass of water, then sat at the table, thinking deeply about what had happened. Though the dream was painful, it gave her a renewed sense of purpose, even if the source of that inspiration came from a memory she would rather forget. She knew that she had to continue fighting, for herself and for Aris, and that she couldn't let his death be in vain. Deep in thought, Sor sat there, thinking about Aris, the man who had given his life so that she could live. And though the memory of his sacrifice would always be painful, it gave her inspiration and hope. As long as she was alive, she would honor his bravery by continuing to fight against the undead. Part 7. Aris Walker Imparo, April and Sor. Stop. As Sor sat at the table, lost in thought, she suddenly heard a sound coming from outside. It was a low, guttural moan, the kind that had become all too familiar to her over the years since the outbreak. She leapt to her feet, her heart racing as she grabbed April in one hand and picked up a large kitchen knife with the other. Slowly and cautiously, she made her way towards the window, peering out into the darkness. And then she saw him. Aris was standing outside, his eyes fixed on her, but he was not the man she knew. He was a walker, his appearance twisted and grotesque, a far cry from the handsome, loving boyfriend she remembered. But then something remarkable happened. He spoke, his voice clear and familiar, cutting through the darkness like a ray of light. Sor, it's me, he said. I know I don't look like myself, but it's really me. Sor was dumbfounded, she couldn't believe her ears. How could this be happening? Could Aris really have turned into a walker but still remember her? She hesitated for a moment, staring into his eyes, looking for some sign of the man she knew and loved. Finally, she decided to take a chance, slowly opening the door and stepping outside, still holding April and the knife tightly. She approached Aris cautiously, her heart pounding in her chest. As she drew closer, she saw that he was indeed a walker, his flesh torn and rotting, his eyes glazed over with an insatiable hunger that twisted her stomach in knots. But still, he spoke to her, his voice clear and warm, just like she remembered. It's me, Aris repeated. I don't know how or why. But I'm still here, and I still know you. Please, Sor, you have to help me. Sor's mind was racing. Could she really help Aris, even if he was no longer human? She knew it would be extremely dangerous, and she could very well lose her own life in the process. But there was something in Aris's voice, something that drew her in. She knew that she couldn't just abandon him, even if he was a walker. Without hesitating, Sor stepped forward and took Aris's hand in hers. There was a moment of hesitation, a moment where she was sure that he was going to attack her, but then she felt the warmth and pressure of his fingers, almost like he was holding her back. Sor, you have to help me, he said again, his voice shaking with emotion. Please, I don't want to be like this. I don't want to hurt anyone. You're the only one who can help me. You're the only one who ever could. Sor knew then what she had to do. She took a deep breath, then drove the knife with all her strength into his head, killing him instantly. As she stood there, staring down at Aris's lifeless, twisted body, Sor felt a sense of sadness and relief sweep over her. She knew she had done the right thing, but it didn't make it any less painful. Slowly, she turned around and went back into her house, gathering herself in April, reflecting on what had just happened. She couldn't believe that Aris had spoken to her, even as a walker. It was proof that there was still some part of him that was still human, a part of him that still remembered her and the love they shared. And although he was gone now, Sor knew that she would never forget Aris. He had saved her life once, and in his own twisted way, he had saved her again, by giving her a new sense of purpose, a new reason to fight against the undead. Part 8. Was hesitant to let April leave on her own, but she knew she couldn't force her to stay. She watched as April walked away, her heart heavy with the knowledge that the young girl was likely doomed to the same fate as Aris. As Sor continued on her journey, she couldn't shake the memory of Aris speaking as a walker. She had loved him deeply before he was killed, and the thought of him being turned into a walker was almost too much to bear. But Sor was a survivor, and she knew she had to keep moving forward. As she traveled through the ruins of the city, she kept her eyes and ears open for any signs of other talking walkers like Aris. Days turned into weeks, and weeks turned into months, but Sor never gave up hope. She encountered many walkers during her journey, but none of them spoke or showed any signs of retaining their memories. Eventually, Sor came to accept that Aris had been a rare anomaly, and that she was unlikely to ever encounter another talking walker again. But the memory of him stayed with her, a reminder of the fragility of life and the horrors of the world in which she lived. Part 9. Imparo Rising Thing. Sor couldn't believe her ears when she heard the walker named Mark speak. Her heart leapt with excitement at the possibility of finding out more about Aris, her lost love. Did you say something about Aris? Sor asked, her voice shaking with emotion. Mark nodded slowly, his eyes seeming to focus on something far away. Yes, he said. I remember him. Sor's heart raced as she urged Mark to tell her more. Mark's words were slow and halting, but Sor listened intently, hanging on every word. Mark told her that he had encountered Aris shortly after he had turned into a walker. He had been wandering aimlessly, but then he had started to speak, just like Aris had done when Sor had encountered him. Mark had been shocked and confused, but Aris had seemed to recognize him. Aris had told Mark about his life before the outbreak, about his family and his hopes and dreams. Mark had been amazed that a walker could speak, but he had also been touched by Aris's story. Sor listened, tears streaming down her face as she heard about Aris's final moments. She thanked Mark for his words and promised to remember Aris always. Part 10 of the finest bedtime story. Sor was torn. On the one hand, she was grateful to Mark for sharing his memories of Aris. On the other hand, she knew that walkers were dangerous, unpredictable creatures. Even if Mark could speak, she couldn't be sure that he wouldn't turn on her at any moment. I don't know if I can trust you, Sor said to Mark, her voice low. Mark seemed to understand her hesitation. I know you can't trust me completely, he said. But I can help you. I know this city better than anyone, and I can keep you safe. Sor thought about it for a moment. It was true that she could use all the help she could get, and Mark's knowledge of the city could be invaluable. But she still wasn't sure if she could trust him. In the end, Sor made a compromise. She would allow Mark to come along with her, but she would keep a close eye on him at all times. She would be ready to defend herself if necessary, but she would also be open to the possibility that not all walkers were mindless monsters. As they continued on their journey, Sor found herself growing more and more attached to Mark. He was a strange companion to be. Nice story, right?